we want to start the super well-being movement to rival that of super intelligence and super longevity. Without super well-being, what is being smart and old?
Awareness, the final frontier. This is Awareness Explorers.
Welcome back, fellow explorers, to Awareness Explorers. I'm your co-host, Jonathan Robinson. I'm with my friend and co-host,
Brian Tom O'Connor.
And as is often the case, we have a guest. Usually one of us knows the guest somewhat well. The other is in complete ignorance. Together we form a good team. This time I know Stephen a little bit. And let me give you a little bit of bio about Stephen. Stephen Zerfas is the CEO and co-founder of Jhourney, a startup that targets specific meditative states known as jhanas, using novel teaching methods and technology. Their first product is a week-long meditation retreat that's become popular with tech executives and engineers. Most participants learn to enter states previously thought to require thousands of hours of practice in under 40 hours of a retreat. And I know Stephen a little bit. We've talked before, and I'm really excited to have you on Awareness Explorers. Welcome, Stephen.
Thanks, Jonathan. And Brian, it's nice to meet you and fun to be here.
So where do we start? Maybe a little bit of your background, Stephen. How'd you get into this, quote, business?
Yeah, business is a funny word, isn't it?
Yeah.
So this all started for me years ago when I was going through a really tough time. I was breaking up with a co-founder and a girlfriend at the same time. I went from 2 jobs and no jobs in a day. A bunch of other, if it could go south, it was going south. So I went on a 10-day silent meditation retreat as a Hail Mary, of having very little experience with meditation, and things got worse. I had 3 migraines in 8 days. And out of desperation, I ended up changing the technique on the last day and stumbled into, so specifically, I realized that there was mountains of self-criticism and all kinds of like looping, ruminating thought habits. And so I thought, what if I do the exact opposite? And 4 hours later, the stress had gone away. And then 4 hours later, I just ended up in this sort of explosively wide open, spacious gratitude, complete fundamental at ease, streaming tears of bliss and ease and relief and joy all at the same time.
I'll have some of that. That sounds good.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I was like, what the heck is this? And the teachers in that particular meditation retreat were like, oh, ignore those kinds of things. They come and go. And I was like, I'm sorry, y'all. I'm sure you got a great thing, but I have to see this through. So I went and did what I thought any engineer would do. And I sat on the edge of my bed running personal experiments for an hour a day for the next several months to see if I could replicate that state. And slowly but surely discovered that it was possible. And then actually, Jonathan, I think we first crossed paths years ago, what would have been 2018, via the Finder's Course community, because I ended up sort of using Finder's Course to sort of guide some of my experiments maybe later that year. But I ended up on the backside of my own experiments and then Finder's Course just for 30, 45 minutes a day before work. I'm like crying, just this wide open peace and gratitude. It becomes easy to stay relaxed and focused at work. My inner world is like a total 180. It becomes easier to be the person I want to be, and it's like my total secret. There was the Finder's Course community, but I didn't totally map onto Jeffrey's locations. I like talked to him a little bit about it, and what was so clear to me was these powerful peak experiences that were happening. They were states, not just in addition to traits. Trait changes were happening, but these. And so a couple years later, I ended up discovering this term jhana, and I got goosebumps and discovered it. I was reading a book, and it's like, this is exactly what happens to me.
Which is a Buddhist term about different meditative states.
That's right. So the word jhana is a Pali term, and it's most talked about in Theravada or early Buddhism. It has roots in its Sanskrit dhyana, and the phenomenology of the jhanas seems quite familiar across, and seems to perhaps have happened across time and space in all kinds of different wisdom and contemplative traditions. Sufi mystics, Christian mystics, arguably Mormons feeling the spirit. At certain times, I've sort of heard phenomenology. I don't want to speak on behalf of the Mormons, but I've heard phenomenology that reminds me eerily of a powerful jhana experience. And at the time, though, I knew none of this. And then when I was first introduced, I was like, well, wait a second. The thing that's maybe one of the most important things in the world to me is like I'm not alone. There's a way of talking about it and describing it, and it's been taught for thousands of years. Why on earth are millions not practicing this? And
Yeah.
that led to an obsession for about a year. I ended up quitting my job and seeing if we could use neurotech and machine learning tools to make these states more accessible. It really seemed to me that the reason they weren't already at scale was because of guesswork. It's really hard to learn how to do meditation. There's so much invisible, nonverbal like your feedback loops get all gunked up with guesswork. So that is why we started as a neurotech company. And then in the process of doing R&D, we ended up running retreats. And that's when we largely became a retreat business because those took off on us.
And how long has that been, the retreat business?
It'll be 2 years next month, I think, from our very first retreat. So about 18 months, I think, in earnest.
And I'm impressed that not only did you get a major article in Time magazine about it, but your retreats are pretty well sold out for quite a while.
Yeah, we've been supply constrained almost from the beginning, meaning we don't have enough seats on retreat, which has been really exciting. There's so many things we want to build and want to do, and it's been hard to prioritize because we've been working on finding ways of opening up more retreat seats instead of supporting our alumni community or building more tech tools that might be useful.
Good problems to have. Too much coming in.
Yeah.
I'm curious about the jhanas and what they really are, and are they a sequence that everyone goes through in order? I know there are 8 of them, although I have heard people talk of a 9th jhana.
Yeah.
And by the way, everyone, jhana is JH, which is journey. That's why Jhourney starts with the JH.
That's right.
In your company. And so I'm curious about maybe some examples of the jhanas, whether you go through them in order, and what are the mechanics of getting into a jhana?
Yeah. All great questions. So depending on sort of the framework you're using, their jhanas are either 4 or 8, or sometimes people talk about colloquially the 9th jhana. And there's a few different ways to think about them. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna sort of offer all like 2. I'm gonna offer like 2 or 3 different ways to think about them, and that will help the listeners sort of triangulate and build a little bit of intuition.
Great.
The first is to think of them as a positive feedback loop between attention and emotion. And so in some ways, like the opposite of a panic attack, in the same way that anxiety can beget more anxiety, can pull your attention in further, and the cycle goes on and on. You can learn to wield your attention in a way where that same mechanism can sort of happen with something like profound gratitude, or just a deep love, or like a peace you didn't know was possible when you sort of see the cycle through. Another way of thinking about it, and this is one that I find a bit more helpful for practice, is that the jhanas are states that naturally arise when we are, I like to say, reducing mental tension, or reducing clenching, or reducing resistance, or conversely, like embracing our experience, fully unconditionally accepting our experience. What's nice about this frame is it actually starts to point at the idea that it's more about subtraction than addition. You're not like zeroing in on something like a laser with your attention. There are ways of practicing the jhanas in which people make heavy use of sort of like a laser-like concentration. But the way we like to use them is this vast, wide open awareness in which you're really like sinking into a hot tub around gently collecting yourself rather than concentrating yourself. This subtle distinction in English that I think is a bit of a better pointer around your meditation object. To give a little bit of an intuition on the phenomenology, you can, one of my favorite metaphors is imagine you're on a long hike. Let's say you've been out for 15 miles and you forgot your water or something. You come back and you were incredibly dehydrated. The first glass of water you drink is ecstasy, is absolute rapture. The most enjoyable, pleasurable thing you could be doing in the entire world is guzzling that water. Then you have your like third, you go through second and third glass of water, and you're still, that third glass of water, still incredible. But it's no longer the ecstasy of having like first. It's now this like deep gratitude of like being home or being like quenching your thirst. And then after that, maybe you want to like jump in the pond or like swim in your pool or something. And this is still at that moment, that's probably the most pleasurable thing that could be happening to you on the planet. But it's no longer the rapture of guzzling the water. It's this deep contentment of like this like post Thanksgiving meal or like being with your loved ones around the fire, like this incredible satisfaction. And then that will even simmer out, and it'll be like taking a nap or lying down to read a book underneath the tree. And at that moment, you don't want to be pulled back into something high energy. You don't want your friends to like drag you out to a night on the town. You just want to rest. And that's the most pleasurable thing in the world. So the nervous system naturally goes from these high energy to lower energy states in our day-to-day life all the time. What the jhanas do, I think, do in some ways is just sort of teach us to zero in on those particular qualities. And when we do so, it really magnifies them.
Good description. You made me thirsty, wanting to take a nap and have a meal all in one description. So thank you. You have also described some of these as almost being like the drug MDMA without the drug. And since I do lots of MDMA therapy with clients, I was very intrigued by that. Have other people said that, or is that more like a promotional thing?
Oh, actually, it's not my words. So
Uh-huh.
we had just heard that so many times
Uh-huh.
that I was like, okay, well, this is clearly like a catchphrase that is going to give us at least a certain like subset of folks an intuition and perhaps like grab their attention. I actually think that hook doesn't always work.
Uh-huh.
If you like talk to my Midwest parents or something, it might not be the the right description. But I do think it points at the fact that these are powerful states,
Yeah.
and that's part of the things that's so exciting about them is, if you can imagine MDMA without the drug, side effect free or something, and you're able to do that on call it 15, 20 minutes notice, the kinds of things that you're able to turn, if life gets hard, you sort of have this refuge. You can use it to actually process really challenging emotions in some ways.
Mhm.
uh, there's a whole slew of benefits that come from having that kind of access that
Yeah.
at the moment is kind of like awareness explorers is probably countercultural in all kinds of ways. But I think relative to mainstream culture, that's shocking, this idea that you could sort of have that kind of experience perhaps on tap.
Now I know you have a 1-year-old, you have a busy life. How does it, I don't know, commingle with your current life? Do you meditate every day? Do you,
Yeah.
uh, has the access been able to be maintained? I'm curious also for other people, what are you suggesting after the retreats?
Yeah. Yeah, totally. So on our retreats, we shoot for you to have what we call deterministic access to the first four jhanas on your first retreat. So we talked about 8 jhanas. I sort of described the first four. The second four are much more about even deeper forms of relaxation, such that some of your typical forms of perception begin to fuzz out.
Hmm.
So your sense of space might fuzz out, and it might just feel as if like space doesn't really make any sense anymore, or like I'm in this room, but I feel like I'm on top of a mountain. This kind of thing. Your sense of like self other may begin to fuzz out, and so it's these sorts of forms of relaxation that end up actually the second four jhanas really to take you into non-dual territory, especially when practiced in a wide open, vast way, as opposed to sort of like a very narrow, laser focused way.
Hmm.
Uh, on our first retreat, so we do see something on the order of like 15 to 20% of our students enter the second four jhanas on their first retreat. But what we sort of see is like what we want to try to offer to everybody is deterministic access to the first four. That means basically independent of conditions, you can get to any of the first four jhanas under an hour.
Hmm.
And if you do that, then you can spin up something like an hour, or maybe a little something along the lines of like an hour long practice, and just be constantly tapping into this like this sense of profound coming home, like this deep reservoir that then you can use as you're this really wonderful virtuous cycle where you go through your life, all kinds of challenging conditioning comes up, you drop into a jhana, you sort of like learn to sort of effectively memory consolidate, turn towards the most, like the death of a loved one, or like a challenging breakup, and with the jhana and with the challenging memory, sort of move into a place of like deep ease and openness, such the next time that trigger happens in the real world, what comes up is like the deep ease and openness of the sit. And so you start spinning this kind of virtuous cycle, which different traditions will talk about. They'll use words like karma, they'll use words like liberation as opposed to awakening to distinguish between those two, that kind of stuff. So the reason we think deterministic access to jhanas is so great is because it now unlocks this path by which altered states become altered traits. Mm-hmm. What my practice looked like for years was basically didn't miss a day, hour a day at least in the morning, dropping into one of these states and then actively looking for the most toughest, like the gnarliest psychological thing I could come up with. Of course, we want to be mindful when we're talking about proper mental health concerns and like navigating something like trauma. Important caveats here that like this isn't clinical advice in any way, but I wasn't working with any grade A trauma, but it was deeply relieving for my being to do it that way.
So during the meditation, you're actually sometimes bringing up challenging things to kind of commingle them.
That's right. So the actually, you know, one of the ways in which you might think about the mechanism by which MDMA enhanced psychotherapy works is this notion of memory reconsolidation. You sort of put the brain into a more malleable state, but also a deeply safe and like connected and high valence state. And then you revisit, you pull up the memory or you pull up the schema of some really challenging issue. And as those two sort of wash over each other, the system kind of updates on like, I can accept or sort of embrace or associate this schema, this gnarly issue in a different way persistently. And I think in my model, you know, we don't have the research is still so early. And so this is all speculations and stories. But in my model, that seems to quite nicely describe what many folks use the jhanas for. And yeah. So I think that answers your question about sort of some of the things that we sort of look to try to produce on retreats so that people can then take that into their day-to-day life afterwards.
Absolutely. How do you know in retreat that someone has reached a jhana? Because obviously we can't look into other people's minds. Is it all self-reporting or how
Yeah, totally. So ultimately it's self-reporting. But we only count like in our sort of data set if it's like self-reported and facilitator approved, so to speak. And so everyone is assigned a facilitator on retreat, and we're looking for things like a certain magnitude of experience. We're looking for like an afterglow. We're looking for a little bit of a loss of agency about it. Like we like to say, like, you don't do the jhana does you. So if you have this afterglow quality, if people are talking about it, was like the most powerful experience outside of drugs that I've had in 6 months, a year, my lifetime, like sometimes including drugs, those are the kinds of things that we start to say, okay, that we feel more confident in. Every now and then we have folks who give a report that sounds incongruent, and then for our like particular, we'll work with the student one-on-one to sort of best support them, but for our own kind of tracking purposes, we won't track that.
Now you offer different types of retreats. One of them is like a work at home and such, and one is in person. Do you find different results, or do you get similar results in the different types of styles?
Yeah, so for a long time, we didn't have the data to suggest that there was going to be any difference in results, which was, I think, both counterintuitive and surprising and exciting. Well, I think we've had about 1,000 students come to the program now, so we have a bit more power, and we've also continued to make tweaks to the retreat structure. And so we have our in-person, we have our online, and then we have our work compatible. I think the in-person retreat relative to the online retreat is caught on the order of like 5 percentage points more people get into the jhana. So a difference, but not a huge difference. That will go up further depending on some retreats we sort of have been able to staff with much more facilitators. So that ratio of student to teacher seems supportive to like getting more people into these states. That is kind of common sense, but we didn't know if that was going to be true until we saw the data. The work compatible retreat is more like a 10 percentage point difference, if I remember correctly. And so What that means is instead of taking a full week off of work, you'll take off two back-to-back Fridays, and then you'll meditate with us full time, like 10 hours a day, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Go to work Monday through Thursday, and then meditate with us again Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and it's all online. So that makes it easier for some folks to attend.
Mm-hmm.
Now, earlier you mentioned that awareness explorers and the jhanas are sort of counterculture and would be shocking to the general public. But to the non-dual community, the journey approach might also prove a little shocking. And so I'll just play devil's advocate here for a little.
Yeah. Tell me. I'd love this.
Yeah. So effortlessness is a major theme of non-dual spiritual practices. In other words, what we seek is already here and reveals itself when we drop our strategies to change our experience or any idea that there's something outside of us to get. And it sounds like Jhourney might be focused on reducing effort rather than seeing effort as an obstacle.
Yes, which is consistent with some of the stuff you were saying about non-duality, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What I was saying is, yeah, non-duality is, in other words, there's something already here, and the effort to try and change our experience veils it.
Yes, I think there's such wisdom in how you say that. There's a distinction I like to make, and this is going to get a little subtle. Let's see if work with me here to see if we can sort of land this point cleanly.
Okay.
Between what I like to call like inside the system and outside the system.
Mm-hmm.
So outside the system, I actually think it doesn't make any sense to say it's less about doing anything and more about not doing, or let's see, you just had a phrase that I really liked, but I think in this, and from outside the system doesn't make sense. I think you said like dropping our, like it's not about doing anything, it's about dropping our strategies to try to change what's in our experience. Mm-hmm. And from outside the system, I'm like, that's just another strategy. Like that's just oxymoronic. So like you were clearly looking to move into like recognition of our non-dual nature or something. So like clearly we're changing some part of experience. But from inside the system, that's excellent practice advice, because the feeling of efforting or the feeling of trying to change something or the intention or something about changing something, it turns out to be the exact opposite of what you want to do. And so I find that really sometimes that distinction ends up making all the difference, especially for folks who are coming from a more technical background. Because if they're listening, I mean, we probably have all had this experience at some points in the journey where you're listening to a meditation teacher and you're like, what the hell? This guy is speaking like demonstrable nonsense. Like he's internally inconsistent. It's like complete garbage. Like I have no idea what I can do with this. And then when you start to see, there's a difference between describing what is versus describing what's useful, or describing what is or the end destination versus how to turn left or how to turn right from this particular spot. Suddenly, I think things start to look a lot more consistent.
Mm-hmm.
Good answer. I know you have played a little bit with the idea that some kinds of technology can be useful. Are you still doing that, or is that kind of a future possibility?
Yes. So the answer is yes to both of those. We started just all day, like we were just a neurotech company. We weren't running retreats. All we were doing was lugging hundreds of thousands of dollars of neurotech equipment to meditation retreats to try to map the neural signatures of advanced meditators moving to the jhanas, with the plans of building a device that would cut out the guesswork and make it easier for novices to do so. And that's a really thorny problem. And the state of neuroscience and neurotech is leaves a lot to be wanting in order to be able to solve that one. But we also thought advancements in machine learning and consumer grade devices and the like maybe had given us a window. So we were willing to take our crack at it. We were making some progress on that when we needed to collect more data. And that's when we started running retreats. And then the retreats just clearly, we were starting to churn out people way higher rates than we were expecting of having these jhana experiences. And we're like, oh, we can start a movement here. Like we can, right now, nobody knows the word jhana. And right now, this is the most like niche, strange thing. Nobody wants anything to do with it. But each new person that gets in is another person contributing to the movement. And so we eventually dropped the neurotech and we're like, all right, we're going to build the foundation. And we've been delighted, I think, by how that's gone. Like the fact that Time and Asterisk and Vox and the Atlantic have covered us means like millions more people have heard the jhanas now. The fact that it's a little bit of a thing for people to do in certain circles of Silicon Valley means that it's so much easier to fundraise, to recruit, to get more people to come on retreats. And now, as this sort of stabilizes, we can return to what is going to allow us to add, an order of magnitude or two to our reach. What's going to allow us to speed things up, make it more reliable, make the experience deeper, and more accessible to people all at once. And for that, we have something where between like about 2/3 of folks enter the jhanas in about a week. That's really exciting, but it's still a week off of work and it's not a sure thing. So getting that like 2 times faster or significantly more reliable, that's really important. And for that's going to require tech. So I think I'm quite excited about using like layering on tech to the retreat pipeline as we haven't layered devices back in yet, but I'm excited about what the potential is. And more recently, what we've been seeing is just how good AI can get at coaching. And so a lot of the work that we've been doing on the tech side has actually been using our recorded video footage and our facilitator intuition at this point to train AI tooling that mostly is behind the scenes right now. So that we have our spreadsheets and we're tracking everybody on the retreat behind the scenes, and we have our team meetings and we're like, okay, so-and-so is here and here. We think they have XYZ issue. What are the kinds of interventions we can do in the next 24 hours to support them? And we have AI chiming in now and saying, here's my hypothesis, or here's where the AI thinks like is the most challenging part of their practice, given what we've seen from their journal entries, their interview transcripts, and other touch points on retreat.
Very interesting, and that's great because that's obviously very scalable. I'm big into gadgets. I've used a lot of them, and generally been disappointed with their results.
Yeah.
I do have a infrared helmet now, which I think has definite possibilities. Have you tried anything like that?
Do you happen to be talking about the Sanjay's neuromatrix photobiomodulation?
Yeah, exactly.
Yes. I have this, I'm looking at it right now. I have a Neurode on my desk. I have another device in the other room. And so you and I are probably both junkies, but I've been quite excited about how something like the Neurode I've been quite impressed with. I don't know if do you know the Neurode, the Nats company?
No. What's that called?
It's the Neurode. Here, I'll actually just show you. The listeners are probably all junkies too, but this is this is a FNIRS. So it has like a certain amount of uses light to visualize sort of just the cortex up here, and then it also has some stimulation with it, and the its main case is addressing ADHD symptoms. And so I find it quite nice for like dropping into a session of deep work, and can have like perhaps a little bit of a quieting or stabilizing the mind sort of effect, which is not why I meditate. I think a lot of like conventionally, I think that's what, all the people who are using the apps and sort of like mainstream, I don't know, culture thinks of meditation, like, whoa, quiet the mind. That's the goal. And I'm like, yeah, my goal is to like become one with the universe, or like drop into like, so I've found the Neurode helpful for that like kind of preliminary thing. But the thing that's really interesting about the photobiomodulation is I've had a number of experiences with it. It's not been 100%, and it's when I've tried it on other people, we're just getting started, trying it out with friends, and I'm like, it's also not 100%, but at times it does seem to help invoke some of those more non-dual qualities. So this is the reason why I think it's interesting to talk about devices in the context of a Jhourney, even though we're not using them right now, is because one of the big theses of Jhourney is that the retreat business has always just been about laying the foundation for these like bigger aspirations, which is like either iterating on devices on retreat or developing extraordinary superhuman quality meditation instruction via AI. We feel like we're really just getting started. And the parallel advancements in AI on the one hand, and in I think certain aspects of neurotech hardware, on the other hand, is really exciting because those are the two things we want to put together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That sounds great.
Speaking of becoming one with the universe, what about metaphysics? How much do people have to believe about metaphysical descriptions of reality?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I like talking to you guys. Yeah, all the you're in it.
Oh, good.
So uh, we distinguish between like ontology and phenomenology, and or metaphysics and phenomenology. And you can play the jhana game, and you can play the like all the way to sort of non-duality that is like unspeakably valuable to me. Like that, on the order of like getting married and having my child, like some of the most important things that have happened to me in my life, um, without any changes at all in ontology, any changes in what you have to believe. You just you just play with your first-hand experience. I myself have, I think I've definitely had like worldview shifts in the sense that like I see sort of incentives and system dynamics a little differently. I'm far more attuned now to like I was a management consultant in my early career, and there's a lot of training about like how to navigate a boardroom, and so you're in a boardroom and you're thinking about the politics, and you're like, okay, what needs to be said? When does it? Who doesn't need like doesn't what needs to be said? Does this need to be said by me? Does it need to be said now? Or like the kinds of filters that are just like constantly running in your mind as a group of people are making hopefully significant organizational wide decisions. Um, Now, if I were to go back into a boardroom, I'd be so much more attuned to sort of like the emotional dynamics that are happening under the table. And that then updates me on how I read the news and my understanding of how different players in different places are responding to their own mind bodies. But I'm totally agnostic, and I myself, I don't think I've had any updates on what this means for like life after death or that kind of thing.
Uh-huh. I was in a spiritual group for 26 years that was very focused on self-awareness in terms of one's motivations, kind of a purification, trying to be more pure in one's motivations, and a lot of feedback from other people in the community. And I found that very useful in life in that, say my shadow side is more able to be seen. And I see that some people who go for like, call it direct higher states of consciousness, they have no sense of their shadow side, which
Mm.
then causes them problems, it doesn't, or they still have their trauma wounding. I'm wondering what you would say in terms of does focusing on the jhanas and the retreat in any way affect those aspects of life, or is that just kind of a different approach to spirituality?
Yeah. So I think this is a great question. So my favorite way of thinking about this, Shamil Chandaria does a great one. Oh, speaking of metaphysics, actually, also to your point, Brian, Shamil Chandaria's lectures I think are just phenomenal. I think they're some of my favorite way of orienting and thinking about the what may be happening in the brain from a like computational neuroscience perspective and predictive processing with regards to altered states like the jhanas, but also awakening and non-duality. Uh,
Can you say that name once again? I don't think I caught it.
Shamil Chandaria.
Oh,
He's now an Oxford professor. He's a bit of a polymath. He used to be a deep mind, and before that, he was
mhm.
like a hedge fund guy and a philosopher. And so he's covered his bases. But his lectures are unifying and I think extraordinary. Uh, Back to your question, Jonathan, and
Hmm.
the reason why this made me think of Shamil is Shamil, among others, are big fans of distinguishing between awakening and liberation. So you can imagine like sort of two dimensions. Awakening is sort of recognizing your true nature, and
Hmm.
liberation is effectively like how your bag of stimuli response patterns, how your personality naturally engages with the world around it, and how much like friction and sort of suffering is like kind of thrown up by default
Hmm.
into your conscious experience. So one is about waking up, and the other is like burning through karma. Or actually, a much more colloquial version of this is like wake up, clean up,
Yeah,
and
gotcha.
then can Wilbur go grow up, show up, kind of stuff.
Right, right, right.
Yeah, um, and so the jhanas, I think, are this wonderful tool for playing both. In some ways, waking up and cleaning up are correlated almost by their nature, because to a certain extent, the more you wake up, it can be easier to hold some of the challenges when pertaining to cleanup. And then as you clean up, it's be easier to sort of abide stably in wake up. And so you can imagine you're sort of like ping-ponging your way to the upper right on this graph.
Right.
What the jhanas offer is, I think, a tool that gets at both. So if you're dropping into something like a profound, I am tearing, I am streaming quietly tears of gratitude and love of appreciation for like all that is. And then I turn and I do a forgiveness meditation. That is sort of using the altered states to clean up. Then maybe I go abide in the 6th or 7th jhana, where you've turned off you've relaxed your sense of space, you've relaxed your sense of self, and you're getting closer and closer to Rigpa or non-duality. Here you're playing with such subtle levels of mental tension and finding the ways in your own mind body to open up to your true nature, that you're playing the jhanas in this way is supportive of waking up. So I think those two things go really nicely together, waking up and cleaning up. And I think the jhanas can be used for both.
Great answer.
Yeah, they may not necessarily be. So to your point, I think you could probably find a world where you like do a bunch of jhana meditating. You maybe clean up like around work, but it turns out, unbeknownst to you, you have all these habits where you resist fear, and you have a bunch of fear about your relationships. And so you end up, unless you're being a little proactive about it,
right. That's a certain, we tend to be compartmentalized in certain ways.
Yeah.
Yeah. One topic that fascinates me is how some spiritual approaches, particularly non-dual approaches, sometimes leave people unable to deal with life's practicalities, or on the other hand, might leave them with a kind of a flatness and a loss of the zest of life and the enjoyment of the individual's gifts and skills. But it doesn't sound like that in your approach.
Yeah, this is a great question, Brian. I have found this phenomenon that you describe, like a checking out or a flatness or something, to be kind of mysterious, in the sense that like I don't see it hardly ever. There are certain views. So one of the things that we talk about in retreat is how your experience is a function of your technique plus your view. And view is made, there's special emphasis put on that in like later Buddhism and more non-dual traditions. In fact, when you get into sort of like the yoga of non-duality and something like Mahamudra, you're really talking about view updates as opposed to changing your meditation technique at all. And view is sort of like how you're looking at the experience. Like if you are seeing every distraction as a like delightful, heartwarming opportunity to welcome part of yourself that you didn't realize you were like suppressing and pushing under the rug, then you will almost certainly engage in the exact same meditation technique very differently than someone who believes that their distractions are evidence of their flaws. And so these two things are really important, and they go together. And there are some traditions, I think, that seems to espouse a view that like life is suffering, so get out. And if that's the view, I'm like, oh man, like we know where that road goes. Like, so I also think that there are forms of meditating that, because this work is so nonverbal and invisible, are effectively encouraging a certain kind of dissociation. And I think of meditation as the opposite of dissociation. I almost want to define it that way. I want to be like, forget all your other ideas of like quieting the mind or like, building your attention or whatever the case. Like, I want meditation to mean the opposite of dissociation, because what happens, you sit down and you just bare yourself raw to all of reality, and you let like the most gut-wrenching grief weave through you, and you find that it's the same. Grief and love are two sides of the same coin. And that same thing can happen with fear. And like what feels like this recklessly scary thing to do in your own psyche ends up being where freedom is. And it's that sort of radical, I think, turning towards an acceptance that is where I think all of the richest progress and most powerful peak experiences, but also most powerful changes and traits are to be had. And so I have every now and then bumped into somebody who I feel like is flat or checked out, but it doesn't really fit with my model yet. And I sense that they've done something differently, and it doesn't seem to be produced on the retreats that we're running.
Well, that's good. And I'm delighted with that answer. That was such a beautiful summary, I think, of how we interact with emotions.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'm impressed with the level of almost like technical detail and strategizing and also data that you're collecting. I'm wondering, is there any question that you would want us to ask that we haven't already explored a little bit?
Oh, good. That's a thoughtful question, Jonathan. Um, I've been really enjoying myself. I have one, I haven't been tracking if there's anything more I want to say, and two, I think each of your questions has pointed it. There's such a world here. I think maybe okay. Here's maybe just a few things that you didn't ask about, but are really energizing to me,
Mm-hmm.
which is I feel like it's a really special time. There's enough happening in this world at the intersection of rigorous and earnest in like technical inquiry
Mm-hmm.
and incredibly deep, heart opening, coming home sorts of contemplative experiences that there's so much opportunity here for like it's I think in some ways it's been neglected. I think for that reason it's tractable, and I think a lot of the more and more people pouring into this space, brilliant people and better tools to tackle this problem means we're just going to keep seeing more and more exciting advancements here in our lifetimes. I would love the thing that I actually see Jhourney as is we want to start the super well-being movement to rival that of super intelligence and super longevity. Without super well-being, what is being smart and old? like, and so
Mm-hmm.
I think there's an opportunity here for us to tap into arguably just the wisdom of traditions that have been around across time and space for millennia, but could only ever do so in a hand wavy way because of the tools they had at the time. There's an opportunity for us to tap into that wisdom with that next level of precision. And with that next level of precision comes more reliability, more scalability, more depth, more what David Deutsch would call, the astrophysicist would call reach, and like that certain quality of knowledge that makes it transferable to other domains. And that's what I just and so I think I find that really exciting. Let's start the super well-being to rival super intelligence and super longevity. And two, I think let's get really specific in our optimism. Like let's go get in the details and either like build an AI system to create a state machine and a policy recommendation engine that's going to allow for unprecedentedly good meditation advice, or let's weave some of the like latest and greatest about certain like vagus nerve stuff into or like predictive processing theories of consciousness into our latest devices to try to come up with like novel nooks and crannies that are going to make this a lot more available to everybody.
Sounds great. I'll vote for that team. I hear you have a guided meditation for us.
Oh, yes. Yeah, let's do that. So let me just, what I will, I'll guide a meditation. The thing that I worry about is we've just talked about all these big ideas and something as exotic as the jhanas. And then we do a meditation that sounds awfully similar like any other meditation. And I think that's a pointer in of itself, that the game is less about like changing what we look at and more about how we look at it. And I'll try to put a little bit of that on display for here and now, and just leave the listeners with the idea that there's a whole world out there, as many of them are already familiar with.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. So the high level I like to sort of the algorithm of meditation here is deeply relax, and I like to do this both mentally and physically, and then gently bring ourselves around a meditation object. I'm going to use just a few mantras that I enjoy that are going to actively cultivate a feeling of like heartwarming, and it'll be, for me, it'll be like in my chest and probably in the back of my head. And that becomes the object. You know, the mantras are just tools to sort of spark that. And then we're going to sink into that. So to deeply relax, go ahead and take a deep breath in and let it out. You can just let that breath trail into the distance. Maybe one more breath in. Now, two little tricks I like to do to deeply relax is a progressive body scan, just sweeping from top of the head to bottom of the feet and back up. I'll often do this slowly over the course of 10 minutes or something. For now, just imagine like a warm shower is just slowly moving down from the tops of your head to behind your eyes and your ears. And as it goes, you're relaxing muscles in ways you didn't know could be relaxed. You didn't know you were tight. I'm always amazed at how much tension I'm holding behind the eyes, as if there were 1,000 muscles working hard there, helping me out when I was not thinking about them. The cheeks, the throat, down into both shoulders, letting them slump a little lower. The upper arms and the forearms. Hands, chest, back. Just a warm shower, magically relaxing every muscle. Letting the gut fall loose. The hips, down to the knees, down to the feet. And then starting to let even any concerns about precision begin to relax and fade out, treating the whole body as one big, fascinating, glimmering and shimmering cloud of sensations. The flow of the breath or the gentle pulse of the heartbeat from the upper lip to the soles of the feet, all part of this gentle glimmer shimmer. No need for precision, just ease. A little bit of wonder at how fascinating the body is. And now, for a second way of relaxing. Just blow out the mind like the sky. Let your awareness reach so high that you might hear airplanes in the clouds above, or feel trembles coming through the deep, deep earth. And you're not reaching. You're just dropping the containment. Like dropping your bags after coming home from a long day at work. Let any sense of containment or focus to any particular sense door fall open. Take them all in, all at once. Michael Taft calls us fast like the sky. Sometimes I'll just stay here for 10, 20, some minutes, finding all the subtleties in which I can open up further. Relax a bit more. Leave myself vulnerable to things like tenderness or wonder or ease, and ways to relax any tiny muscle throughout the body. A mind wide open, having come home to rest, and a body just shimmering and glimmering with life. And then when I'm ready, in this wide open, gentle, coming home sense of wonder and shimmering, I'll pull ever so gently to the middle of it all. A sense of well-wishing, a giving away, an open-hearted feeling. I like to use the simple phrases, may all beings be happy. May all beings be healthy. May they be filled with joy and live lives without suffering. This little phrasing, these little mantras will spark just the tiniest little emotion in my chest or behind my eyes. And in this vast, wide open mind and this gratefully shimmering body, I'll sink into that like a hot tub. Anchor my experience from that feeling wherever it's strongest in the heart or in the back of the head. And every 30 or 60 seconds, repeat my phrasing, my mantras, so that I can sink into it a little further. And it'll fall, it'll rise. May all beings be happy. May they be healthy. May they be filled with joy. And then it'll fade. And I'll just watch it fade, taking that as another invitation to relax. The open-hearted feeling on the way in and relaxation on the way out. For time's sake, I'm going to end this here. May all beings be happy.
Wow, that was really beautiful and so precise at every step. It gives me a sense of how you approach this, and I'm really thankful. How can people learn about what you do?
We're on Twitter. That's probably the most active place if you want to engage with us. Jhana Tech.
And you have a website too, right?
Yes, we have a website. Yeah, so Jhourney.io or Jhourney.ai. Those will all work.
And that's Jhourney with an H, just as a reminder. JHOURNEY.io.
Jhana Tech on Twitter is JHANATECH. I'm realizing one thing we didn't say is you just used that word precise, Jonathan, and it got me thinking. So much of what we do on retreat is running personal experiments. So we'll do guided meditations like that that we just experienced. But then the real magic is you come in with your facilitator and we grill you. We're like, what have you tried? What have you learned? What did you experience? Give me 3 emotional labels. Where were they in the body? How did they change over time? Were they oscillating at what frequency? Like, what do you want to do next? And then we'll get this big dump, and then we'll pattern match that to all of our other students. And then we'll say, okay, here's some of the things I'm thinking about. And then we'll co-create an experimentation plan. And then you go out and run your experiments for the next day, and we'll talk tomorrow.
That's fantastic. Yeah, that's a great approach.
And it's such a
Uh,
different paradigm from the prevailing guru paradigm. You know,
Yeah,
what he says, he's the expert, not your inner noticing.
totally. And that makes all the difference. For the long time, we resisted the word teacher because we're like, no, like you're the captain of your own ship. At most, we're like advisors or cheerleaders. Like talk to the cheerleading team. That didn't quite have the same precision connotation, so we didn't use that one for very long.
But I
Yeah,
like it.
yeah.
Since there's a long wait list for the retreats. In the meantime, what do you recommend? For example, I've heard you say that the book by Leigh Brasington, Right Concentration, was very helpful to you. Would that
Yeah.
be a good sort of in the meantime?
Yes, I think that's a great one. I think actually for practice instruction and phenomenology, I'm a really big fan of David Johnson's Path to Nibbāna. David is he's pretty sort of dogmatic and strong in his beliefs, and so I would, for anybody for whom that's a potential turnoff, I would encourage you to read it like an anthropologist or an actor studying to sort of lean into the role. But I think the phenomenology and the instruction is really great there too.
Thanks.
Yeah. Cool. All right, you guys, I got to run. It was delightful talking to you, and hope to see you soon.
Thanks, Stephen. So if you like this stuff, folks, feel free to get more of it at patreon.com/awareness explorers. And for as little as $1 a month, we send you a bunch of extra stuff. And we appreciate all the support of our Patreon supporters. And hopefully if you like this, tell other people about it and practice it yourself. That was a pretty powerful guided meditation, and we hope that it's impacting your life. And till next time, keep exploring.
Keep exploring.
Thank you for listening to Awareness Explorers. To learn more, you can check out our website at awarenessexplorers.com. Please subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast app. We'd love it if you would post a review. And please share our link on Facebook and with family and friends, because knowing yourself as awareness is the greatest gift you can give yourself or someone you love.